Hello there. Welcome back to grade 10 economics. In this video, we want to look at an essay of a past exam question paper. So this essay, before we answer this essay, we are going to start to go through the requirements of an essay. So remember, our essay, we are going to subdivide it into three main categories, whereby we are going to have the introduction, and we are also going to have the main part, which is going to represent the main body, and then we are also going to have a conclusion. So very important for us to know the requirements that are needed in terms of these three segments, whereby we are talking about an introduction. Remember, what you are supposed to write in the introduction, you are supposed to know it, and what you are supposed to write in the main body, you are supposed to know it, and also the conclusion. So in terms of the requirements, there in the introduction, you are supposed to define, you may define a concept or keyword in the question. So an explanation of a term that you see in the question can also consist of your introduction. So what you are not supposed to do in the introduction is that you are not supposed to include any part of the question in the introduction. So you're going to rewrite the a part of the question in the introduction, but you are just going to, in your own words, explain any term that you see there in the question. Then you explain it without mentioning it in the introduction. Remember, there is a key that is there that or a note that we have in the introduction that we should not include any part of the question in the introduction. So also, we should take note that we should not include any part of the question in your introduction in the body. So whatever you're going to write in the introduction, after you have compiled the introduction, the elements that are there in the introduction are not supposed to be seen again in the main body now. So let's take note of those points. Also, the other don'ts, what you are not supposed to do in the introduction, avoid saying in the introduction what you are going to discuss in the body. Don't preempt your discussion in the introduction. You are not supposed to tell us exactly how you are going to go about, or the discussion that you are going to do, how you are going to critically analyze. It's not supposed to be shown in the introduction. So in other words, we are saying the introduction should be just be brief, so that you go straight to the point in terms of what is required in the introduction. So the basic idea that is there we've given is, we have said, just explain any term that you see in the question, then you explain it without mentioning it in the introduction. You just explain. So that's what we have. So these are some of the things that we are going to go through in this question, and we try to understand that. So we now go to the second part, which is now the main part. So in the main part of the main body, that's where you're now going to write in detail. We're going to discuss in detail what is required by the question. Remember, you're also supposed to do the question interpretation. That is, what is actually required by the question is something that you have to comprehend and come up with before you start to write. And then those elements that are there in the question, that of what is required, you are going to go in detail in the main body. You discuss in detail. You do an in-depth discussion of the topic that you are given in the question. You can also try to analyze, compare, depending on the phrasing of the question. Remember, these questions will be different in the way that they will be phrased. So according to the requirement of the question, you go about it. If you need to analyze, you analyze. If it's just a discussion that is needed, you do that. If it needs an in-depth discussion, also you can do that. So this is what we have in the main body. So now we go to the additional part. We also have the additional part, which is going to come after the main part. So here we are saying we also have the additional part. So in the additional parts, that's where you're going to give your own opinion, or you can maybe try to briefly critically discuss, or if it's necessary, you can present your opinion in the form of a graph. And then if you present a graph, obviously, you don't have to just write a graph and draw a graph and then leave it. You are supposed also to explain that graph and make some interpretations from that graph. So basically, that's the additional part. Then finally, we move on to the conclusion. In the conclusion now, that's where you're going to give a brief summary of what has been discussed, what you've discussed in the main body. You are just giving a brief summary. And you should take note that you should not repeat facts that you've mentioned in the main body. Very important. Do not repeat facts that we have already mentioned in the main body. And then you also what you can do in the conclusion is to give an opinion. You can also give a value judgment depending on what you have discussed in the main body of the facts that you have discussed. Then that's where also you can make an option by giving additional support information to strengthen your discussion. And if it's necessary, again, you can try to contradict the your view that we have expressed in the main body. So that is a contradictory viewpoint with a motivation. So you are supposed to explain the relevance of that contradiction that you are putting down. That why are you saying so? So that's the motivation. So that is what we have, guys, in terms of the structure of the question of the essay question. So these are the requirements. So we are now going to go to a question that is a typical examination question that we want to look at, and then we try to apply whatever we were discussing here. So let's not forget to subscribe and share. Let's share the link to our colleagues who are doing grade 10 economics so that we get notified of new videos that are going to be uploaded. More typical examination questions are going to be uploaded in this channel. So let's try to see what we have according to the question that we have for this video. So this is a question that we have here. This is a question of an essay on a paper one question paper. The first part of the question reads that discuss in detail the effects of economic fluctuations on the participants in the economy, and the question it has got 26 marks on that part. And then we have the second part saying evaluate the exogenous reasons in brackets monetarist view for business cycles. So this is the question, the first part there, whereby we are looking at the effects of economic fluctuations on the some terms that we have there in the question. On the first part there, we have got economic that we need to understand before we answer the question. So question interpretation is very important to see what is required according to the question. So we have got economic fluctuations that we want to go about to understand what exactly does it mean. So, but economic fluctuations, we know that these are changes in a country's economic growth and national income. So changes that we see, if we have an increase in economic growth and then we have a decrease, and those ups and downs are going to describe economic fluctuations. So economic fluctuations are described by upswings and downswings. So when we are having upswings, it means we are having an increase in economic activity, and when we're having downswings, it means we are having sort of a depression, that the economic activity is going down. So this is exactly what we have by economic fluctuations. So you'll see that these changes that we are talking about, that we have in economic fluctuations, these changes can be caused by a number of factors. We can also have employment levels can cause the upswings and downswings that we see in economic fluctuations. Employment levels, we can also talk about productivity in the economy, can cause that. Even demand and supply of goods can lead to that. If you look from a macroeconomic point of view, you will see that even interest rates being the cost of borrowing, can also lead to these economic fluctuations. Remember, interest rates, when we reduce interest rates, it's going to be cheaper for the economy participants to access money from financial institutions. So when they access money, it means obviously they're going to expand their production capacities, and they're going to have an increase in economic activity, which is going to lead to many positives, like increase in gross domestic product can be one of it, and then a reduction in unemployment also is going to be noticed. So those are some of the issues that we have there. Then we also have on the second part there, it's saying evaluate the exogenous reasons. Evaluate the exogenous reasons in brackets monetary review for business cycles. So exogenous reasons also we can try to understand what are exogenous reasons for business cycles. So these exogenous reasons for business cycles, they are factors that influence the business cycles from outside the economic system. Factors that influence the business cycles from outside the economic system. So we are saying usually um, the economy do not have any control to control those exogenous exogenous factors because they are coming from outside the system. So we've got examples of those exogenous factors like it can be an exogenous factor that we cannot control as an economy, and also political situation also can be an exogenous situation that we can have. So this is what we have. Then also on the first part of the question, we have got a term that is there when you say participants in the economy. So we also need to know what are participants that we have in the economy. Remember, according to the uh, according to a model economy, the participants that we can have in the economy, we can have households being one of the participants. We can have firms that are the businesses that we have in the country can be also a participant, and government also is a participant, and also we've got the foreign market. So basically, we are talking about four main participants that we have in the economy: households, firms, the government, and foreign markets. So this is what we have. So going back to the first part of the question, we are going to see that it's saying discuss in detail the effects of economic fluctuations on the participants in the economy. So we are going to go through some of the factors that are going to be adjusted by the economic fluctuations. So if you go to the main board, we are going to see that, for example, we've got changes in aggregate demand and supply. How economic fluctuations going to affect or change the level of demand and the level of supply is how we are going to approach the question. So very important. Then we go to our first part of the question whereby we are having the introduction. So introduction, like we are discussing, that you can try to define or give a meaning of one of the terms that we are seeing in the question. So we are seeing that our introduction is a country's level of business activity has a big effect on its citizens. People are normally affected positively by upswings and negatively by downswings. So you are seeing that the phrasing that we have in the introduction is explaining the issue of economic fluctuations, that we can have upswings and also we can have downswings as we are explaining all the meaning of economic fluctuations. So remember what we said when we were explaining about the requirements of introduction, that you do not have to repeat the terms that are there a part of the question and then write it in the introduction. We did not write economic fluctuations, but we explained the meaning of economic fluctuations. So this is what we have in the term in the form of our introduction. So going forward, we have got our main body. So we can now go to the main body and try. Remember, we are trying to abide by the requirements of the main body according to what you will be given in the question paper. So in the body, we are going to start by looking at one of the factors that is adjusted by fluctuations, by economic fluctuations. We have got changes in aggregate demand and supply. So changes in aggregate demand and supply. So you see that the first point is trying to explain what actually does aggregate demand and supply mean. It's saying aggregate demand and supply is the total number of goods and services demanded and supplied. And so that's the basic explanation that is there in terms of aggregate demand and supply. But you see that aggregate demand and supply, we are talking about the total demand and also the aggregated supply of the whole economy. In other words, we are saying the demand of all participants in the economy, if we add them to get the total, it becomes the aggregate. So basically, is we are adding everything, and then we get the total of the economy. That becomes the aggregate demand. And supply also, we're talking about the aggregate supply, is the supply of the whole economy. So basically, that's what we have. So we are not talking about a particular industry whereby we look at the demand of a particular industry. Maybe it's the manufacturing industry. It will be not the aggregate demand. We need the demand of all the industries that we have in the economy so that we get the total demand. So that's the first point, is trying to explain what the meaning of aggregate demand and supply. Then going to second point, saying during an upswing, the aggregate demand and supply increase as a result of increased income and spending by households. So our next point now is trying to explain what happens in an upswing and what effect does an upswing has on the aggregate demand and supply. And we're saying that when you're having an aggregate demand, when we're having an upswing, our aggregate demand and supply will increase. So that's what we have on the second point. Moving on to the next one. Firms increase their production in order to meet the increase in demand. So obviously, this is representing an increase in economic activity as firms are increasing their production. Obviously, economic activity is increasing. Then, for example, consumers visit restaurants more during an upswing because they do have the income to spend there in the restaurants. Then, during a downswing, so downswing becomes the opposite now. It means the economic activity is going down, is going in the opposite direction. During a downswing, the aggregate demand and supply will decrease as a result of decreased consumer spending and production by firms. The next point, for example, consumers visit restaurants are less during a downswing. So I just given a scenario that, for example, talking about restaurants, visits to restaurants will decrease in a downswing. The last point, if a downward cycle continues, the economy may go into a depression. So a depression, we know that it also explains the decrease in the economic activity, So this is explained as the issue of having a downswing. If it persists, it will lead you to a depression. So this is what we have, the explanation that we have in terms of changes in aggregate demand and supply. So basically there we are looking at the effects of economic fluctuations on aggregate demand and supply. So we are going to the second part now where we've got changes in economic growth. So that's the second point that we have here. So we are also going to do the same. We're going to look at effects of economic fluctuations on economic growth. That's what we are going to do on the second part. So we go there and look at the explanation that we're given there. Maybe we might want to understand what exactly we mean by economic growth. But in economic growth, basically, we are talking about the increase in the production of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. So increase in the production of goods and services, we are saying we are comparing the production of goods and services for the previous year and we compare the production with the production of the current year. If there is an increase there, a movement showing an increase in the total monetary value of goods and services that are being produced, we say there is economic growth. So it can be measured in terms of the increase in the market value of goods and services produced, or we can present it as a percentage increase in the domestic product, that is GDP, or we can present it in the form of gross national product, which is our GNP. So basically, that's what we have in the expression of economic growth. So how does now economic fluctuations affect that? But obviously, we are seeing that when there's an upswing, we are going to have an increase in economic growth. But when there's a downswing, obviously, the economic growth will go down. So this is what we have. So let's try to read the points that we have. Economic growth refers to the increase in the amount of goods and services produced by a country over a given period, which is correct. And usually this period is an annual period, which is over a year. Then our second point, economic development. Now, the second point is now explaining economic development. It refers to an improvement in education, health care, or income of the population. So, looking again at economic development, a further explanation that we can give in terms of economic development is that is the process of improving the economic and social well-being of a specific area. That is the social and well-being of the citizens of a country. If it's improved, we say that there's economic development. So it involves, you see that it involves qualitative and quantitative growth. So when you talk about quantitative, we're talking about the number of goods that are being produced. If they increase, we say it's a qualitative increase. And also on the qualitative, now we are talking about the quality of life that is being enjoyed by the people of the country. So that's now the qualitative part, the standards of living, the level of standards of living. If it goes up, then we say it's a qualitative position that we have. Then when we are having economic development, also we are supposed to have an equitable distribution of resources. Equity meaning equal distribution of resources. That's what we have. So when we are having equitable distribution of resources, we are saying we do not have a huge gap between the rich and the poor. The gap that is there between the rich and the poor is not very big. That's what we call a normal equitable distribution of our resources. So second point is saying economic development refers to an improvement of education and healthcare or income of the population. Then economic development implies an improvement of living standards. Then next point, an upswing leads to higher economic growth due to an increase in economic activity and productivity. And then next point, increased production and exports raises the gross national income. So obviously, when we're having an increase in production and also exports is being activated. If increase in exports is being activated by the increase in production in the domestic economy, and finally it will raise the gross national income. So this is what we have. And then on the next point, a downswing will lead to a decrease in economic growth, which is exactly what we're explaining. Then during a downswing, firms will produce less goods and services. This results in a slowdown of the growth rate. So this is what we have in changes in economic growth. Then on the next point, we have changes in price levels. How are economic fluctuations going to affect the price levels in the country? So first point is saying the price level changes when the demand and supply of goods and services decreases. So when you're having a decrease in demand, when you're having a decrease in demand, what effect does it have on the price levels? So obviously, the economic fluctuations are going to affect the demand. Remember, we were saying in an upswing, the demand is going to go up. And if the demand go up, we have to notice an increase in prices. Remember, the explanation of the forces of supply and demand in the determination of price levels. So we are saying, for example, we can just maybe trying to make an illustration whereby we are saying if demand increases, price also increase. So let's see on the second point, during an upswing, there is an increase in production, employment, and household income. Higher income and spending leads to an increase in the general price levels. So explanation on this, we can try to put it on a graph so that we simplify the understanding of that part, whereby we are saying increase in demand. So remember, we are having, let's just try to make it simpler. We are having our vertical axis. In this case, we have our, remember, we have our demand curve and also our supply curve. So we can try to represent that. So our demand curve obviously is a negative slope. This is our demand, and then our supply will be like this. So this determines the price level. So when we are having an increase in demand, remember, an increase in demand is going to be a shift of the demand curve. This is our demand curve, which is negative slope. So it will shift this side, which is upwards. So it will come this side. So this is exactly what we have. And you will see that when we're having such a scenario, we are saying this is the original price level. Let's just say price equilibrium price level. But due to the value has shifted to demand curve, you're going to see that the price level is going to increase from illustration of how does increase in demand lead to increase in prices. So you're going to see that if demand increases, it shifts the demand curve from D1 to D2. And then also the equilibrium point will shift also from PE to P1. So this is generally illustrating an increase in price. So this is what we have in terms of explanation of how does increase in demand cause increase in prices. So the opposite is true now when we are having a decrease in demand, which can also be explained graphically. So going there on the next point is saying we have got, for example, the prices of staple foods such as bread and milk will increase. And then next point, in a downswing, there is a decrease in production, employment, and households income, which is very correct. The last point, general price levels decrease because of lower consumer spending and income. So this is just a decrease in demand that is going to lead to a decrease in prices. So this is what we have according to on changes in price levels is one of the factors. Then we can try to move on to the next point, whereby we are saying changes in employment. How does economic fluctuations economic fluctuations cause changes, affect changes in employment? Obviously, in an upswing, we are going to have economic activity. More workers are going to be accommodated in the production processes, so employment will be reduced. But in a downswing, we are going to have a higher unemployment. So we got the first point saying during an upswing, business needs to produce more goods and services to keep up with the demand, and then this results in more employment. So In an upswing, that's where we are going to have more workers being accommodated and employment to go up. Then next point is saying improvement in the economy will allow business to make better profits. Then businesses can afford to pay employees better wages and salaries. And then during a downswing, business produce less goods and services. Profits and income of businesses decrease. So obviously, if the profits decrease, they are also going to accommodate less workers since they cannot pay for afford to pay more workers. So the next point is saying businesses cannot afford to pay workers and start to retrench workers. So this retrenchment process will lead to unemployment. So the employment will go down. Employment level will go down. So unemployment will increase, which is the last point. So this is the explanation that we have in terms of changes in employment. Then we go to changes in the exchange rate. So exchange rate on its own is explained as the rate at which one currency is exchanged for another. That's the basic explanation that we can give in terms of an exchange rate. Then how is it affected now by economic fluctuations is the question. So those are the explanations that we have there. In a downswing, there is a decrease in demand for local goods and services. So when there's a decrease in demand for the local goods and services, it means also the demand for our local currency is going to go down. The demand of our rand in South Africa is going to go down. So when the demand goes down, uh, also the value of our currency will also go down to also depreciate. So basically, that's the essence that we have there. Then there is a decrease in exports whenever there is a decrease in demand for our goods and services. It means the foreigners are not in a position to buy our goods, and then our exports will go down. Then this lowers the demand for the local currency also, because for them to buy our local goods and services, they should have our local currency. They should have the rands so that they can be able to buy in South Africa. So if if that happens, that the demand has gone down, it means also the demand for our local currency, which is the rand, will also go down. Then our next point, the decrease in exports reduces foreign reserves. So obviously the reserves are going to be affected since we are not we are not selling outside, so we are not getting foreign currency. Then the demand will depreciate in value, weakening the currency, which is exactly what we're explaining. During an upswing now, there is an increase in foreign demand for local goods and services. This results in an increase in export for goods and services. Increase in demand for the local currency can be expected. This will result in the rand appreciating against other currencies. So how is the rand appreciating is also can also be explained within the context of a graphical representation of the forces of demand and supply. So when we are seeing that when demand is increasing of our local currency, that's when the value of our currency is going to go up, which is exactly what we explained from the point of view of goods and services, that when demand goes up, also price goes up. So exchange rate as a price of foreign currency also will go up. It also follows the normal shifts of the forces of supply and demand, which is going to determine the equilibrium point whereby we are going to have the rate, which is going to be the exchange rate. So this is what we have in terms of changes in exchange rate. Go to the next one. We're saying the impact on economically vulnerable. So economically vulnerable, so obviously these are people that are disadvantaged that we have in the economy. How are they going to be affected by economic fluctuations is the question. That's how we're going to explain it underneath there. So the groups of people that are economically vulnerable, both the elderly and old people that are going to work. So basically the economic vulnerability is being measured by the income of those groups of people that they are low or they don't have any income. So we could talk about the elderly, we're talking about children. So on the bracket of children also have students, they are also economically vulnerable. And then we've got low income populations, even we can also include migrant workers also can be part of economically vulnerable people. And then we've got prisoners also, uh, part of that. And then people with disabilities also fall under that. Refugees also fall under economically vulnerable people. And also sex workers are part of economically vulnerable people. So how are they affected by economic fluctuations? Obviously, they are negatively affected when there is a downswing. So that's how we are going to present it. So let's look at the explanations. The effects of ups and downs on the economically vulnerable are enormous, which means they are very huge. Any downturn will rob these people of satisfying their basic needs for food, shelter, and clothing. The next point, a downturn in the economy will result in the business downsizing their production and closing factories or branches. This will lead to large-scale unemployment, starting with the less skilled workers. And the last point, the less affluent will not be able to satisfy their basic needs and desires. So basically, the significance of the economically vulnerable people being affected is noticed when there is a downswing, when the economic activity is going down. That's where we're going to have a huge negative impact on the economically vulnerable people. So this is the last factor that we are looking at. So we can just try to see in terms of the last part of our answer. So we have got the additional part now. Remember the additional part we are saying on the additional part, remember what we explained at the beginning of the video, that you are giving your own opinion. You can critically evaluate again. You can draw a graph if it's necessary and explain that graph obviously and make some interpretations. So according to the answer that we have here, we are not going to draw a graph. We have got some we are going to critically analyze in terms of what we have presented. So here we are going to critical analyze in terms of exogenous reasons. So if you go back there at the beginning of the question, let's just try to see what we have. In terms of the question part there, we are told that evaluate the exogenous reasons, that is the monetary view for business cycles. So we are going to start by understanding what are exogenous reasons. So exogenous reasons for business cycles, remember we said these are factors that influence the business cycles from outside the economic system. And we're saying they cannot be controlled. They are very difficult to control. These are exogenous reasons for business cycles. And we're talking about climate as an example, is an exogenous reason, which is very difficult to control. So we are going to evaluate that. So this is what we go to the last part of the question is saying, the first point is saying exogenous reasons refer to changes in business cycles that originate externally. They come out of the system, which is our economy. And then second point, they initiate outside the economy of a country. Third point, the government has no direct control over exogenous factors, which is very correct. Then examples include political. We can have political factors being exogenous reasons. Military interference also in the economy can be part of exogenous, such as wars, droughts, which is part of the climate, famine, and then you've got COVID-19 also. It was and it is a exogenous reason, and other natural disasters can also be classified as what is exogenous. So exogenous reasons cannot be predicted easily, and it is difficult to avoid them. They affect the production and consumption within the economy. So they negatively affect. So last point is saying exogenous reasons can lead to an upswing or a downswing in an economy. So depending on the dimension that they are coming from, they can lead to an upswing. They can also lead to a downswing. So this is what we have on the additional part on the clarification of the exogenous reasons. So on the last part now, that's where we're going to have the conclusion. Remember what we said about the conclusion at the beginning of the video. When we're talking about the conclusion, we are saying just give a brief summary of what we discussed in the main body. But you don't have to repeat facts that you already mentioned in the main body. That's another tip that we gave. And then you can give an opinion or a judgment, or you can give an additional support, or you can give a suggestion in the conclusion. So according to the conclusion that we gave according to this video, we are seeing that this is coming as a suggestion. It is saying fluctuations in economic activities should be managed so that they affect the economy positively. So this is just coming as a suggestion. Fluctuations in economic activities should be managed so that they affect the economy positively. So this is what we have, guys, on essay writing according to this video. Then this essay was on business cycles. Hopefully this video was very helpful. More essay questions are going to be uploaded. Let's subscribe and share. Let's share the link to our colleagues who are doing grade 10 economics. As for this video, I'm out. We'll meet again in the next video.